And it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer really standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Please remember to visit the website podcastufo.com for past episodes, blogs, and forums. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello, everyone. This is Martin Willis, your host, and we have the one and only Alejandro Rojas. He's back from vacation. He's going to help us with the news coming right up. And for our guests this evening for both hours, we have Terry Ray, and he's an author and UFO investigator. And we're going to be talking about his new book. It's called The Complete Story of the Worldwide Invasion of Orange Orbs. And we're not talking just about Chinese lanterns. I've had kind of a fascination with these for a while, and I want to see what he has to say about that. I want to thank everyone for their help and support, and I thank every listener for listening. If you'd like to subscribe to hear the whole full show, go to our website, podcastufo.com, and you'll see right on the sidebar all the information you need right there. And I am ready to bring in Alejandro. But first, Alejandro, did you hear that Stephen Bassett, he called me, I don't know if he called you, and he said that disclosure has really happened? Did you hear that?
Oh, my goodness gracious.
You mean he called me before you?
That.
He called me before. Well, anyway, that April Fool's, buddy.
Oh, you had... Oh, and everybody heard you get me, and you fooled me there, and you have the evidence on the air of that. You trickster.
And I'm not going to edit it out. So...
Oh, man, boy, when I get my hands on you, I'm just going to grab that cute little neck of yours and squeeze and squeeze and squeeze.
Just like last time.
Yep, just like last time.
So tell me what's happening.
Oh, yeah, there are some funny April Fool's ones out there. Oh, we're going to debunk people's April Fools.
Oh, good.
Ha. Don't fall for this, people. Okay, the first one, and these are funny. These are funny guys. It's Ryan Sprague. You know this character, right?
Oh, yes, I do. Yeah.
This tricky little guy. He posted this on his Facebook. Just received word from the Sci-Fi Channel that my series pilot, Bigfoot Alien Ghost Hunters, has been approved. Production begins in October in North Carolina. More info to follow.
He does have, he's got a very good keyword string going there, for sure.
Well, I know, and that's why I thought this was plausible. You know, Bigfoot Alien Ghost Hunters. I thought some TV show just wants to get it all in there. People love it. I thought, oh, you know, and I tell Maureen, get the name of this show. And she's like, you idiot, you're so stupid. Not like that. She was mean, but she didn't say all those things. But anyway, she was just like, that's obviously an April Fool's joke. And I was like, oh, Ryan Sprague. So he got me. Don't let him fool you. But then I read another one on Facebook, and this one didn't get me because I wasn't going to let it happen again. And this is John Greenwald of the Black Vault. He wrote something about how the X-Files, and I was going to talk about that. We'll talk about that in a minute. It's returning. So the X-Files this summer has got 6 episodes coming back. This is no joke. This is exciting.
Right.
You know, Gillian Anderson, David Duchovny, Fox Mulder and Dana Scully will be back. This summer they're going to do 6 episodes. But he wrote, here's the part that isn't true. He wrote, they want me to be the 3rd FBI agent. And what's funny is most of the people, Ryan and John, most of the people that are commenting on these things they posted believe them. And they're like, that's so cool. Congratulations. So I wasn't the only one to get fooled.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's not bad. I think you knew this at, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. I had a whole fake website. I actually made the domain switch over to it if someone clicked on my website. And I put a lot of work. I put about 50 hours into the bogus website. It was a lot of fun. Leslie Kane even loved it. So, but anyway, that was then. I didn't have the energy or time to do it this year.
Even Leslie Kane loved it.
Can you believe that?
Wow.
Yeah. She had a laugh.
That's cool.
That is.
That's
So what's going on for UFO?
in the news. So we already talked about the X-Files. I think that's a big deal because really when you look at it, a lot of UFO researchers feel like the 90s, there was a lull in UFO research for a period of time there. I felt that way when I got involved with this. All of the documentaries and TV shows ended with the debunkers coming out and saying, but it's all just BS. But, things have changed, and I think that's largely because of the X-Files. So this is exciting. X-Files coming back for 6 episodes.
I know, and
summer.
I can't wait to see what new special effects and stuff they'll be using, and maybe even new thoughts and ideas that they didn't have before.
Some new music would be nice because the synthesized horns, I think the technology's been improved as well.
Yeah.
So we'll see. So that was one of the stories I wanted to talk about. But another one that I'm excited about, Ben Hansen, of the Sci-Fi Channel's Fact or Faked Paranormal Files. Of course, that show is no longer being aired, but that is what he's known in these circles for. He did an analysis when Jimmy Kimmel had on Bill Clinton and asked him about UFOs.
Right.
And it looks like, when Obama was on Jimmy Kimmel recently, the day before, the L.A. Times or L.A. Weekly had written about that Jimmy Kimmel has said he's going to ask Obama about UFOs, and they said, maybe this guy will analyze it, and they posted about Ben Hansen doing this analysis. Well, when Obama was on the show, Jimmy Kimmel had kind of warned Obama, they're going to look into this and every movement and everything you say and analyze everything. And alluding to Jimmy Kimmel possibly knowing about Ben Hansen doing this. And sure enough, Ben Hansen has done it again. So he did this analysis. It's 40 minutes long. So I watched the 40 minutes, and I took notes, and I summarized in a very long story because there was a lot of information. Essentially, Ben's analysis. And what he's saying is that for instance, Obama's breathing faster when they're talking about UFOs. That, to him, shows some sort of nervousness. Also, Obama joked the whole time, was cracking jokes. Really good ones. I thought he was funny.
Yeah, it was funny.
And Ben says this is often used to kind of belittle the person asking questions to hopefully make them feel silly about their question so they move on to a different topic. But he notes that Jimmy Kimmel was not dissuaded. He kept asking questions. And he feels that the body language through most of this, Obama was joking around. But he feels at one moment Obama's demeanor changed. And he says that it changed so much. For instance, he looked down to the ground, and he thinks that, through his body language analysis, that Obama seems to be a very honest person. And he feels that he made an honest statement when Kimmel was really kind of prodding him about information. Obama replied, "I can't reveal anything." And because of various reasons, like some of them I've mentioned, Ben Hansen believes that he was telling the truth when he says that. So Ben feels that either he's been told he can't know or talk about this topic, or he knows something that he can't talk about. He kind of made a funny he compared it to like a guy who would like to go out with his buddies, and he can't because his wife wants him to clean the garage. But he doesn't say, "Oh, my wife said this and that," because, he can't diss his wife in front of his buddies. So he just says, "Oh, sorry, guys, I can't." And he kind of gets sad. He feels that that's kind of what Obama was demonstrating, that same sort of sentiment or feeling. So kind of interesting that Ben should feel that way.
And Ben, for the listener that doesn't know this, Ben is a former FBI agent, and he was trained in that sort of thing. I've talked to him about it on the show before. It's not to say that we can say for sure, but it certainly makes it interesting.
Yeah, it makes me think. I was 100% convinced Obama was joking through the whole thing. I'm still there, but it does make me think. It makes me scratch my head, and Ben in this video is very thorough and professional. So it's a great video. I recommend that people take the 40 minutes to watch.
And I will you have that embedded, I'm sure, on Open Minds?
Yep.
Okay, so that'll be a link in the show notes. And
cool.
We got one more story?
Yeah, sure. I'll go with this one. Unfortunately, it's a debunking one. I like to put in UFO stories, but we really didn't have a lot. We do have some interesting ones from MUFON on the site that you can go check out. There's like 10 stories I wanted to talk about this week, but I do want to let people know about this one. There is a video out there. It's gotten very popular, showing what looks like a UFO being hauled around by a truck. And someone posted it and said, this is a UFO being transported near Area 51. Not the case. Actually, this video, it looks like it's the same video that was posted years ago when they were transporting, it's like the X-47B. It's this high-tech, cool-looking drone. They were transporting it across the country, and there were sightings of it and people taking pictures, and so there was lots of news stories about this being a UFO. It looks like that same video just taken off of YouTube and then reposted on YouTube. So you could check that out, but it looks like even if this is a new video, it's the exact same thing if you look at the pictures. So this is the X-47B, which is really cool looking. But that's what it looks like, has gotten. Because unfortunately, this person took it, reposted it, and there's goofball news sites out there that are posting it all over the place. And it's kind of frustrating when the news does that, and they don't do their due diligence to find some history around these things. So don't be fooled.
That gets the ball rolling on something like that. We have time. If you'd like to throw out another one of those stories, I'm interested, so go ahead if you would.
Yeah, this one got a lot of attention. This was a Florida witness who says that a silent UFO cloaked itself. So this is a guy, and these were events that happened in December of 2013. This was posted on MUFON, so Roger Marsh, he will post MUFON sighting reports on our site for us and summarize them. This is a guy with his girlfriend, and they say they saw a large boomerang shaped craft at night. They said it was very distinct, that they could see the lights that were going up and down this thing, and there were hard edges to it, and that it kind of cloaked itself and flew away. Very interesting account that is getting a lot of hits on the site, so people might want to check that one out.
All right. And again, those links will be right in our show notes. Well, thank you, Alejandro. Welcome back. I hope you had a good vacation.
I had a great time, and thank you for having me on the show on April Fool's Day. I hope you're not trying to imply something.
You give me something to think about. All right, thank you, and I'll talk to you next week. And everyone hang in there for the quick music break, and we'll be right back with Terry Ray on the Orange Orbs. That music was by Bruce Ranier. Thanks, Bruce, for supplying us with some music. And we have Terry Ray on. How are you, Terry?
I'm fine, Martin. How are you?
Great. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. By the way, that music was putting me into a trance. I don't know what that was all about. I felt I was drifting off somewhere. Go ahead.
That's how I usually get my guests. I play that in the background. Yeah. Hey, thank you for sending the book along. Is this your first book, by the way? I never asked you that question.
It's my first nonfiction book. I am a novelist by profession.
Ah, that's why it's written so well.
I sent you a second one. Did you get the second one?
I did, yeah. And
go ahead.
No, I was going to say I did notice this was very well written. And we can talk about that. First of all, if you wouldn't mind, And I didn't really mean to cut you off there, but we can talk about that a little bit later. But if you can tell the listening audience before we get into our topic, just your background, if you would.
Well, I grew up in a steel mill town in western Pennsylvania. Went to Grove City College. I was a military pilot in the Air Force until I was injured. I spent about 6 months in a hospital and got out of the service as a disabled veteran. And I got a teaching degree, a master's, and I taught elementary education. And then in the evening, I went to law school and I became a trial lawyer. And then I decided to get an honest job and became a law professor.
Wow. That's quite a colorful background you have there.
Yeah, I left out a bunch of stuff, but those are the high points.
Wow, interesting. So while you were in the Air Force, did you have a fascination with UFOs all the way back then? And if so, was it ever spoken about?
Well, I had a fascination with UFOs since I was 10 years old. A group of us were out in the late summer, about 11 of us playing football in a big yard, and we heard a loud roaring noise, and a jet came overhead, very low altitude, I'd say about 500 feet. And I think it was probably an F-80. They used to call them Sabre jets. But anyway, and there was he was right behind a very, very strange-looking craft that was nothing like we could ever make, had no wings. And they made a turn right over us and took off in another direction. And we ran to my parents' house, and my mother was in the kitchen washing clothes, and like 11 of us ran into the kitchen, and we told her we had to call the Army because we saw a flying saucer, and she told us to get out. And that was the beginning of my fascination with UFOs.
Wow. Before we move on, I want to just mention something about that. I hear that so often about, some type of fighter pilot or jets flying, following. And a friend of mine who lives in Canada, when I actually told him I was doing a show on UFOs, he told me a story about being out on the deck during a party and seeing two fighter jets flying right behind this disc and watch it take off. Now, the question I have about this, and it's just a wonderment, I would say, is you never hear pilots really talking about being the person in the jet. Do you think it's just the classification of the whole thing?
Yeah, if you're a military pilot, you're forbidden to do it. The government is very strict in that they do not allow any talk about UFOs while you're in the military service.
Have you ever actually heard that said to you as a pilot?
No, I didn't. But I have. I heard talk from some of the older pilots, about things they talk. They talk among themselves. Mm-hmm. And they say, well, you can't be talking about that kind of stuff, So you're just you would probably if you went public, if you're a military pilot and went public about seeing something and you describe it realistically as UFO, you would have a very good chance of being dismissed from the service.
Dishonorable discharge or something like that?
I don't think they'd go that far. They don't want to get you really aggravated.
Yeah.
But there would be some discipline involved.
Now, what about
commercial pilots? They keep their mouths shut, too, because the government has done such a good job of making fools out of people whenever they report a UFO that everybody, actually, even the average person is careful. Let me tell you something really interesting. Only out of 100 people, probably only one or less, maybe in a larger group, maybe 500 people, only one will report a UFO anywhere to any official body. And that is because they are afraid of the repercussions.
I also really think, because of my own experience, that I didn't even know where to report something. I never thought to look online.
That's another problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and the places that this is something that we're going to be getting into in MUFON. We want to try to get real numbers of how many sightings, how many UFOs are actually in the air. And if let's say in a month we have 1,000 reports to MUFON. Well, what we need to know is how many people, and let's say there's 1,000 people that see UFOs in a month. How many of those report the sighting anywhere? Number one. And if they do report, where do they report? And I can tell you the primary places. There has been some research done on this, and MUFON is not at the top of the list. It's way at the bottom. Number one is the police.
That's who I called. Yeah.
Right. Number two is the media. You call a radio station, you call a TV station. And third, they dial some number, some government number. Whatever they can find in the yellow pages, some government official. And all of those are worthless because, police don't want to be bothered with it.
Right.
The mainstream media, the only thing they'll use it for is for their funny story at the end of the news.
Right. Mm-hmm.
When they bring on the Twilight Zone music and they all laugh and talk about this.
Crack wise.
And the government, as a policy, don't acknowledge that there are UFOs. So. And very, very few people contact MUFON because even though MUFON is becoming much more broadly known because of, I think a lot of it has to do with Hangar 51, their show. Mm-hmm. People are becoming more aware of MUFON. But even at this current moment, I would say if you asked 100 people on the street if you've heard of MUFON, maybe 5 or 10 would have heard of it.
If that, I believe you're right.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So that's something we really have to find out because if let's say we get 1,000 reports in MUFON in 1 month, how many sightings were there actually for us to have gotten 1,000? If you understand what I'm saying. Right.
Yeah.
If we're getting 1/100th or 1,000th of the sightings reported to MUFON, the number of actual sightings is huge.
Absolutely. You can't even imagine. And what percentage of that is unexplainable is probably still low, but if you do the math, it's probably higher than the people that are reporting them.
Well, I have an opinion on these things that are so-called explainable. A lot of in the research I did for my book, I read over 2,000 cases on orange orbs, and I can tell you that the vast majority of them were dismissed, saying it was an identified craft, such as a Chinese lantern, a weather balloon, and that sort of thing. And I know from the description, it wasn't either one of those. It was an orange orb. They are vastly different than a weather balloon or a Chinese lantern. Their behavior is. Right. So a lot of these things that are supposedly explained really are not explained. What is offered is merely a spurious explanation.
Right. When you're mentioning this, a lot of times when people claim to have the real reason for things happening, I was just shown an article. Now, the article's old. It goes back to 2011. But there was a guy saying the incident Exeter is totally explained. And I'm reading this article, and they're talking about this refueling plane, and it had strange lights on it. So So there's your answer, and done deal, and this thing was hovering over a house for forever, and the police saw it, and it came back, and on and on. It's really an amazing incident, the whole thing, and but all the people that read that article and just say, "Oh, there it is, it's explained," and that can happen many times in many ways in this field. Really,
it happens, in my opinion, most of the time, and when that it really bothers me that there's this common saying, well. There are probably 5% of these cases are unexplained. That's not really true. A much larger percent are unexplained, and they are explained with some rationale that makes no sense. I've
heard Stanton Friedman say something along those lines. Like he goes by. He's a very statistical person, so he goes by statistics and saying, they say
he lives around here,
That's right. He lives north of us,
down near Pittsburgh. Yeah.
Oh no, he lives in Edmonton, Canada.
Who am I thinking of then?
Well, he probably lived there at one time. You're not thinking of. I think you're thinking of Gordon.
No, I'll think of it.
Stan Gordon. He lives down there.
It could be.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Boy, we really got off on this subject here. Yeah. All right. So let me just ask you this. So you became a lawyer at one time and a professor and all this. Were you into the subject enough publicly at that point through all these different careers?
No.
Okay.
I wasn't. I was very much a believer in UFOs because of what I saw when I was 10 years old, and also just through pure logic. No, to me, it's more illogical to say there aren't, only intelligent life is on Earth. That is more illogical than saying there are countless intelligent civilizations in this universe.
Yeah,
that is far more rational.
I'm with you there on that. The arguments, of course, you've heard them a million times, like they can't get there from here. And there are vast differences. But, I've argued many times, and not to be redundant, but, you get an advanced intelligence will eventually figure out something we have not.
Well, you know what? Einstein already figured it out. Because when he discovered that the space-time continuum is bendable. And he speculated that we could create wormholes by bending space. And these people say, well, if they're a million light years away, there's no way they could ever get here. That's true. If it's linear travel, even if they travel at the speed of light, it would take a million years. But if they bend space,
right,
and through a wormhole, they could be here almost instantaneously. So that really drives me crazy, this thing, like, it would take too long for them to get here. If Einstein has the concept and worked out the numbers as to how you could form a wormhole, which is merely a black hole. It's a hole through the space-time continuum with bent space. If he can figure that out, I'm sure some civilization that's 1,000 years ahead of us figured it out a long time ago.
Right. And, and the other thing is the energy. They would never have the energy. And, here you just hear those different arguments.
But, that's anthropomorphic. That is putting something in human terms that doesn't belong there.
Right.
Because we're measuring how much energy we can produce and saying, well, we couldn't possibly produce that much energy. You're right, we couldn't. But some far advanced civilization, I'll bet, can do it.
Yes, I've had those. I did a couple of debates, and that was part of the debate was, just the fact that we're thinking in our terms today and not what these advanced.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So I think we're getting along pretty good so far.
So far.
So anyone listening live, you can jump right over to our chat room. Just go to podcastufo.com. And the right sidebar, you'll see our chat room. You can jump right in and ask our guest a question.
Wonder if they're living and they're not alive.
Well,
never mind.
Yeah, that we'll have to.
I just asked.
That we'll have to have that for another podcast.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about your path and what made you actually write this book.
Well, in 2013, that's just when I was I was about to take my exam to become a field investigator for MUFON. I was in Ocean City, Maryland, in the last day of July. I think it was July 31st. And I was sitting out in the balcony facing, we were on beachfront. I was facing the Atlantic Ocean, and I saw to my left, I was all by myself out there. The 3 kids and my wife were like in the room asleep, and I wasn't allowed to watch TV, so I was banished to the patio. Anyway, on the balcony to my left, which would be north, since I'm facing the Atlantic Ocean, to the north I saw an orange dot a great distance away, and it caught my attention because as a pilot, that is not a color you see in the sky. You see you see reds, greens, whites, position lights in general, or the the headlights of an aircraft. But you do not see orange in the sky at night. And so it caught my attention. I just kept watching it, and it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger until I would say it was about 5 miles away from me, and it was about the size of a full moon. And it was an orange sphere, and it was very, very beautiful. It looked like the setting sun. And there were no lights on it. Everything was illuminated. There was a sort of a soft pastel muted light coming from inside. It was very pretty. And it was about maybe 500 feet off the ground. And it was right along the water's edge, about 5 miles away, and it stopped there. And for about a minute, and then it headed out to sea. I'd say it went out about 10 miles, then stopped out there, and then it went into about a 45-degree climb up to about 10,000 feet, leveled off, flew about 10 more seconds, level flight, and then headed southeast into a thunderstorm. There was a thunderstorm out on the horizon. And I was sort of speechless. It sounds funny. I was by myself, but I didn't know what to think. And so I wanted to run in and tell everybody, but then I thought what the repercussions would be if I ran and woke up 3 kids and a wife to say I just saw a flying saucer. I don't think it would work out. So I stayed there. And by the way, I had binoculars, so I was able to get a close look at this thing. About 10 minutes later, I saw another orange dot, same place. This thing went through precisely the same flight pattern, and in all, I saw 8 of them.
And they all did the same exact flight pattern.
Exactly. It'd be like if I was given a flight plan in a military jet, and I was supposed to fly certain headings for a certain period of time. That's exactly what that was. So that was not a Chinese lantern. They don't fly flight patterns. They blow with the wind. It was not a balloon. And it was, in my opinion, I'm having been a pilot, I try to keep up with aircraft development. I'm quite sure we have nothing like that. So I have no doubt in my mind that was something not made on Earth.
Now, let me ask you this. While you were sitting there and you're looking out the balcony, I read your book, but I wanted you to tell your story.
Yeah.
I read that part of it, and you went and got your popcorn and all that.
Right.
And this thing continued on. What about a camera?
I wasn't. You know what? There was a camera in there somewhere, but the room was completely dark. And do you have kids?
I have a grown son. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and your wife's sleeping in a room with all these kids.
I got it.
If you flip on, you understand. You just don't do
Okay.
So I felt my way back out of the dark room out onto the balcony again.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I didn't have a camera.
Okay.
What? It's called marital peace.
Yep. Okay. And so yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I dutifully filed my report with MUFON for Maryland, and got a call from the field investigator, and we didn't talk for very long. He told me it was the best report he's ever seen. And then I told him I was already ready to take my field investigator exam. So he said, "Oh." So he already knew I had some training. But anyway, I talked when I got back to Pennsylvania. I'm from Pennsylvania, MUFON. First meeting I went to, I was all excited about this. And I was telling this group of people at my table about seeing these orange orbs. And they all start laughing, and they said, "Don't waste your time. They're Chinese lanterns." And at that point, that was in 2013.
And these are MUFON people.
Yes, they're field investigators.
Okay.
And I found out pretty quickly that was the ubiquitous opinion throughout MUFON. These things are not taken seriously. They have been somebody decided they were Chinese lanterns, and no matter what came along with an orange orb case, the explanation was identified as a Chinese lantern. And maybe you could tell that to someone who hasn't seen these things, but you can't tell anybody. There's nobody that's ever seen an orange orb that could ever be convinced it was a Chinese lantern. It's impossible. It couldn't be. And, of course, this kind of aggravated me, and because I was all proud of my find. So I decided, well, I'm going to find out what these are, and I'm going to come back and tell everybody. And I thought it would take me a couple of weeks. And it took me an entire year of research. I read over 2,000 cases, and I finally pieced the entire the entire story, just as the book says, the complete story. I pieced it all together as to what's going on. I went back to the 1890s all the way up to 2013, reading cases, and I put it all together, and that's how the book came about.
Okay. Now, had you done any research or looked into this topic before that sighting you had?
No, I did not. Before I was in MUFON, I remember from time to time I'd read in the paper about these orange balls of light are sighted, and then you get to the end of the article and they say that NASA or whoever the official body is says these things merely are Chinese lanterns. Mm-hmm. That's all I knew about it. So for all I knew, if you see back then, if you saw a orange ball of light, it was a Chinese lantern. But once I saw these things, I knew that was a ridiculous explanation.
Now, sometimes you hear about these. Well, one of the things you hear often about these is something you said earlier, is that it was beautiful. A lot of people, you hear people say that the light was an unusual light, not a typical light more of a light that would glow than shine or something along those lines.
It's actually, I would describe it as mesmerizing. You really can't take your eyes off of it when you see it.
And then the other thing that puzzles me is, for instance, let's talk quickly about the Phoenix Lights. That comment was made also from, I think, Dr. Lynn Katire. Someone said something about they were mesmerizing or beautiful, but some people were saying that you could see through the craft, like to the other side, and some people said that it was like waves, and a lot of times you do hear about triangular formation of these orbs, and sometimes people say that you can see through them, sometimes people say they block out the light. Any comments on that?
Yeah. I don't know what they mean by they block out the light.
I'm sorry, starlight.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. You can. They are somewhat translucent.
Yeah, you do.
You can see something inside, and a lot of people see something that's kind of a dark spot in the middle. And I once I did all my research, I found out what that was, and but the Phoenix lights were orange orbs, and orange orbs. They want to be seen. That's what if you want to understand orange orbs want to be seen. They have picked a color and a shape that they know people are going to look at because it's an unusual color in the nighttime sky, and then they do things to entertain people. They form in the cases I've read. I've read descriptions where they get into a square, then they quickly shift her in a triangle, then they arrange themselves in a circle, and they almost look. A lot of people say it almost looks like they're dancing together. They do funny little things, and they are known to get into to mimic constellations. They will blink out and all of a sudden be the Big Dipper.
Huh.
And they are up there to be seen. That's what you have to understand, and that's why orange orbs are much different than anything that's ever come into our skies before, because prior to the influx of these orange orbs, seeing a flying saucer was a very, very rare thing, and usually it was some sort of blurry picture.
Hang on just a moment. We have an incoming call. Let me make sure this is about this show. Hang on. Yes, you're on the air at Podcast UFO. Who am I speaking with? They're gone. Okay, it was a New York City number. Hey, since I already interrupted you, let me ask you a couple of questions up on the message board. One was a question I was going to ask you also, but have you concluded what the differences are between the red and orange orbs, or are they the same?
No, they're not the same. The orange orbs are the big ones. They can be the diameter of a football field. The red orbs are what I'd call are drones. They're small things. They're usually about the size of a softball up to about the size of a basketball. And these things come up. They're very up close and personal. They come right up to a person, and they're a few inches from a person's face. They move all around their body. It's almost as though they're scanning them, and then they skip away. And I saw one red orb when I was coming back from Cleveland, Ohio. I was on the Ohio Turnpike, and I don't know how far you've gotten in the book, but there is an underwater orange orb base in Lake Erie. And I saw coming from Lake Erie this red thing that moved. It went from horizon to horizon in about 2 seconds. And it was one of these little red drones. They're orbs. They're red spheres, but there's nobody in there. I think they're being manipulated from another place. Orange orbs have something in there. There are vehicles inside of them. So that's the difference. They're two completely different things.
Okay. I'm going to ask you why you think that, but first of all, I didn't want to go too far because a question up there and one I had in mind too is, can you explain the dark spot?
Yeah, the dark spot is the vehicle. The orb is not the UFO. There have been a number of people that have seen what the orange orb is a cloak that the vehicle projects around itself. And there have been a number of people that have watched this happen. They see some sort of craft. They see it in the sky. It's somewhat often described as metallic looking. And then this discharge, which some people describe as a plasma looking thing, comes out of the bottom of the craft. It comes down around the craft, up around it, and envelops the craft and forms a sphere around it. So what you're seeing, the dark spot is a vehicle, a space vehicle. So all the orange part, all that is a cloak around a vehicle. And another interesting thing is I have a picture of this, by the way, a case I investigated. There can be any number of crafts inside an orb. I have a picture of one with about 12 crafts inside of it.
And how do you see that?
This is a very good picture of it, and you can see it through the orange membrane. You can see the various vehicles in there.
Really?
Yeah. And here's how orbs are often described as splitting into two and then merging back into one or splitting into four.
Yeah, I've heard that.
I can tell you how that works. Let's say there's 5 crafts, 5 vehicles inside this orb, okay? And one of the vehicles is going to leave. What it does is it cloaks itself and then leaves that orb. Are you with me?
Mm-hmm.
And so it looks like there is an orb splitting, but all it is a cloaked vehicle leaving that orb, being cloaked itself. Are you with me?
Okay.
That's how it works. And if it goes back in, it can go back. So now you have a large orb and a small orb beside it. They can make this orb any size, by the way. Some of them they blow them up to be huge. Some of them are just barely enough to cover the craft. So there are different sizes to these things. Obviously, if there's like 10, 12 vehicles inside this, it's a pretty big pumped up orb. It's a large size orb. But that's what's going on. If a vehicle leaves the main orb, it forms its own orb before it leaves. So it looks like there's 2 orbs now.
All right. Well, how are you? Just a question for you. And how are you? You sound very definitive. First of all.
Yeah. That's because I went crazy for a year.
Okay.
I did. It was a total obsession with me. I read over 2,000 cases. You know how long that takes?
Yeah.
A long time. And I don't think anyone else ever did this before.
Now, before we get off of that right there, were all these MUFON cases?
Yeah.
And are the files readily available to anyone, or just because you're a field investigator?
Because I'm a field investigator, I can get everything. I have my own ID number. I can get into the private files, and I'm able to extract the field investigator's report, all the all the documents that are attached, all the photos, videos. I can get all that. So the average person couldn't do that.
Uh-huh.
The average field investigator could do that, but that's generally not what field investigators do. They are one and done. What I did is something that I'm trying to encourage in MUFON. We have, I don't know how, maybe 1 million cases or more, but almost nobody connects the dots. Do you understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. They're just, it's a sky full of stars, and no one's drawing the lines in these things. And what I did that is unique in UFO research is that I connected all the dots with the orange orbs to form a complete story of it. And I think we need to do more of that.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you a context.
Now, you were saying that the orange orbs are generally larger, but I have heard people talk, maybe that you got the colors wrong or whatever, but people have talked about a small orb in a house or in a backyard.
Right.
I think there's quite a story, I think, about some little girl in the backyard in an orb. Maybe she was hurt or something. Are you familiar with that one?
Well, I'd have to get the details. I've read so many of these, but I'm sure I read it.
How when you have been talking about, the vehicles inside the orbs, how is that being received by other people? Other investigators, or how's your book?
Well, you know what? The average person on the street, I think, is more open-minded about it than MUFON is, because MUFON has been around a long, long time. Since the 1960s, and there's sort of like any organization. After it's been around for a long time, I think they develop group think on things. And, there's sort of this understanding among, the members that certain things are a certain way. And it's they're not, in my opinion, as open-minded as they should be. Maybe they were in the very beginning, but I think there are people that have just been in a MUFON for like 40, 50 years, and they're kind of like set in their mind what is what. And they really aren't, many are not open to new suggestions. So once I explain it, I think they don't want to admit that it makes any sense, but I can see from the look in their eye it makes sense.
Now, so you read these 2,000 cases.
Yeah.
But I understand that is a big, huge undertaking. But what made you come to certain conclusions? Let's go back to the vehicles, for instance, is because they were splitting off, which I have heard before, that type of thing? Or what made you come up with these different conclusions that
all the various descriptions that I read of orb activity. Once you read the book, you have my book now, and I included just a small number of cases in there, probably, 100 or so. But they were representative. Those aren't all the cases. They're representative of how I identified certain things in terms of orb behavior or what they do. And as I said, I connected the dots. I read, I started seeing certain things repeated a number of times, the same thing, and I just started piecing this whole thing together until I got a really good picture of what's going on with these orbs, what they do, what the cloaks are all about, even, the traffic patterns. I was able to establish what their traffic patterns were by going through each case and noting the direction they were coming from and going to. And I was able to figure out the orbs in the United States come from 4 different locations. And I was able to determine that by charting each case I read.
You know what? We have about 6 minutes left to the top of the hour, and I just realized that you were going to make some type of announcement.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, fire away.
Well, this is actually a life lesson to everybody that's listening. Often people say, well, what can one person do? There's a problem. What can one person do? Well, this is a good story as to what one person can do. As I said, in 2013, when I saw these orange orbs, the almost accepted dogma of MUFON is that they are Chinese lanterns. And since my book came out, it's been bought. It's been doing very well worldwide, and a number of field investigators are reading it. And it's made its way all the way up to the state directors and then to MUFON headquarters. And I have sort of accumulated some disciples who are picking up on what I did, and some of them are connected with the headquarters. And the powers that be have become so influenced by my book and some of the work that some other people are doing that after they read my book, they sort of began doing what I'm doing, that MUFON headquarters out in California has decided to do something they've never done before. They are forming a specific research project. They're going to call it Project Orange, created to study one phenomenon, and that is the orange orb phenomenon. And there are 4 members right now. I'm a member. Bill Burns is a member. I'm sure you know Bill. You know Bill?
Bill, I'm sorry, last name?
Bill Burns.
Bill Burns, yeah.
He does UFO Magazine, and he was on UFO Hunters. He's
I'm going to be on his show in a couple of days, actually.
He's like Mr. UFO.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a guy by the name of Bob Spearing. He's from New Jersey. He read my book, and it sort of inspired him. He's doing a lot of detailed work using a lot of computer apps to sort of piece together the things that I was doing. He's using Excel and spreadsheets and all sorts of things. He is on the a project member, and Erica Lukes, she's a state director in Utah, and she also works with MUFON headquarters. She's also on the project. So that is a 180-degree turn that was made since last October.
And your book was released when?
October of last year.
Okay, so that's what you're talking about.
It's made a tremendous difference in the thinking in MUFON. It really has, to the point that they're doing something they never did before. We're going to have Project Orange.
Yeah.
And we're going to do a lot of in-depth studies, documentation. We're going to be going on, various investigations. Want to hear one of the first things we're going to do?
Sure.
What we want to do is completely do away with this Chinese lantern thing. We've got to get rid of that idea and move on. And what we're going to do is, Bob Spearing and I are working on this in particular. We are going to do a map of the United States and find the hot spots. There are places that orange orbs visit daily. People come; they know where to stand, and they'll see them come out every night. What we're doing is we're going to map them, and what we're going to do. By the way, do you know what night of the year, or have you gotten this far in the book? What night of the year that the sightings go up 1,000-fold?
Wasn't it July 4th?
Right, 4th of July. That's because the orbs want to be seen. And they know that probably 230 million people are going to be looking at the sky that night.
I've also heard people argue that that's when the Chinese lanterns are out there. I've heard that argument just to throw it out there.
Sure, they can make the argument, but if you look at the characteristics of what a Chinese lantern does, an orange orb does, it's sort of like comparing a bird to a blimp. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They're nothing alike. I mean, once you see an orange orb, you will never say that you will laugh when someone says that was a Chinese lantern. They are so different. But anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to publish this map throughout the country, through news media and everything, and tell people to go this coming 4th of July to one of the hot spots. Take their cameras, take their videos, and I predict we're going to get a lot of converts this 4th of July.
How about that? Do you, for the first hour listeners, do you have a website you can throw out there, or where to get your book?
I'll tell you, you can get it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, whatever. But I would like to recommend that you get it on the MUFON bookstore online, because the money goes to MUFON. Rather than making Amazon rich, I would rather see MUFON get the money. So I would suggest they go to it's called ArcStar, ARCSTAR. But if the easiest way is just to go to the MUFON website. Anyone can find it, MUFON.com, and you will see on there books. Just click on books, and I'm the #1 seller there.
Really? Okay. So that's it for this part of the show. Thank you for listening. If you would like to listen to the second part of the show, you can support us at getjoyride.com. That information is right on our website. So for only $1 or more per month, you can listen to the whole show. Also, if you're having trouble and you would like to listen to the whole show, but it's not working through Joyride, or you're in some country where the exchange isn't working right through Get Joyride, please let me know at martin@podcastufo.com. We'll try to get everything ironed out. So I'd like to thank people for helping out with the show. Alejandro Rojas with the news. Thank our guest, Terry Ray and Carrie Lloyd Whitehouse, and Bruce Renier for our music. I want to thank Peggy Shunning for managing our Facebook page. Remember to like us on Facebook for all the latest UFO news and astronomical news as well. So that's it for the show, and we have Dr. Leo Sprinkle, the old-time investigator. He will be on next week. And thank everyone for listening, and remember to keep your eyes to the sky.